Chapter 7, World of No Identity, World of Faiz. World of Faiz. Dragonic starts declaring in chants to Tsukasa's annoyance. He had to hear his loop of nonsense over and over since this morning. Even in the showers. I heard you. So what's Tsukasa begins to say as they come down the stairs but then pauses, catching a strange yet delicious scent. Dragonic is already sniffing happily as he starts flying towards the hall. Tsukasa follows the dragon and walks through the swinging doors to see large platters of food on the table in the dining room. Oh wow. Look at all the rice. Dragonic expresses being overjoyed at all the food, especially the different plates of rice. He claps his hands in a prayer before dining down hungrily on the meal. Tsukasa smirks looking at the massive feast. This must be Natsumi's doing, probably wanting to reward his greatness for saving another world and the food he ordered in making too. You must have been working the morning away. Tsukasa calls out, checking out the food, expecting that Natsumi was in the room. Is today some kind of anniversary? Tsukasa then pauses, eyeing the plate of sea cucumber, cooked and cut in the way he enjoys it. Wait, how did Natsumi? I think I got all of your favorite foods. Tsukasa staggers as he and Dragonic turn and gasp to see it was Daiki Kato, smiling towards Tsukasa. Tsukasa-san. Dragonic immediately spits out the rice in shock. You. Tsukasa utters out, upset. Of all people it had to be this guy, and this worried him. He immediately questions him seriously. How did you get in here? I have my ways. Kato responds carefree. Dragonic growls, not answering that question straight, but the dragon had realized something more unease. Single quote ellipsis. Kato Daiki. How are you even in this world? The purple dragon questions him while adjusting his fedora. Daiki smirks at that and begins to speak up. That's a funny thing actually. It is at that moment that Kato makes a questionable face looking at the lizard-like creature with the business gangster-like outfit. Who am I talking to? He asks. Confused, with Tsukasa replying, relaxed. You're looking at him? Kato gives a look at him before looking back at Dragonic. He kneels down, touching the snout of the dragon as he grows, showing his fangs. This surprised Daiki, questioning him. You're real? Dragonic glares silently with one eye, with the other half covered by his fedora. This startled Kato, questioning further. What are you? Some rare lizard with wings and can speak? Single quote ellipsis single quote. Tsukasa immediately backs away in silence, recalling the first time he's met the dragon and his temper. Dragonic, swallowing his tongue, shaking violently, kindly responds, struggling with his teeth gritting. Since you're new, I will kindly correct you that I am not a lizard. Then a gecko? Daiki asks uncaringly. That broke the back as Dragonic snaps and roars viciously, breathing flames at him. Kato widens his eyes and runs out from the house before the flames consume him. Dragonic flies out after him, shouting angrily. Dragon, good to know. Daiki replies with a grin, brushing off his jacket. He then says, pointing at the angry dragon and then towards Tsukasa. Anyway, I'll pick you up later, and Tsukasa-kun. Do enjoy my meal from the bottom of my heart to you. Dragonic makes a disturbing yet angry face, not from the pick you up later line, but the meal was meant for Tsukasa, who just narrows his eyes. Annoyed, though in return, don't get in my way. Kato then warns him with a firm face. Tsukasa narrows his eyes seriously before questioning him. What the hell does that mean? Kato just smirks, repeating himself, doing the gun finger hand gesture directly to Tsukasa. Like I said, don't get in my way. Only warning, Tsukasa-san. Tsukasa gazes firmly at his immature threat. Till later. Daiki salutes, bidding his farewell, and leaves. Tsukasa glares while watching him take the turn. Single quote ellipsis. I don't like him. Dragonic states irritated him. Tsukasa agrees with that, though the dragon adds with a slight grin of humor. But he sure loves you. Tsukasa gazes annoyed, not a fan, at what that comment meant. Just then Natsumi, Yusuke and Absol rush outside hearing the commotions. What was wait? Natsumi pauses and suddenly begins to burst out into exciting giggles. Tsukasa turns, eyeing her puzzled as she asks him. Still giggling. Tsukasa-kun, what's with that outfit? Tsukasa looks down and panics as he is now wearing a ridiculous high school uniform with a school bag. He scoffs being ignorant as he states, I look charming like a high school student. Yusuke corrects him with a grin. Tsukasa glares annoyed as he swings the bag at Yusuke, who backs away just evading it. Tsukasa then says, carrying the bag by the shoulder, a man like me looks good in anything. Natsumi and Yusuke just try to chuckle back their mouths from laughing. Tsukasa runs to the corner to catch up to where Yusuke was running to and did not see him. He grunts, muttering out, Damn, where's Kato? Dragonic flies up behind him. Also surprised he got away so quickly, like a snake. He then taunts with a small smirk. Yea, where is your husband? Stop it. Tsukasa tells him off, annoyed by the stupid statement. Worry about him later. Dragonic says, acting serious as he adds, looking around at this new world and no doubt a whole new fight. We got a world problem to solve first. Tsukasa nods, looking at his bag, and states the obvious, where their first lead is. High school it is then. He then turns down to see Absol chewing on some food she grabs from the table. Tsukasa then warns her kindly. And you bet. Absol finishes chewing and swallowing before biting onto his leg. Tsukasa grunts in agony as he yells, kicking her off him. And stop biting me. Absol releases her fangs off him and barks, smiling. Absol. Tsukasa glares upset as he limps his bitten leg. Sometimes he feels like that dog is trying to break or sprain his leg out of pleasure. Natsumi sweat drops, following him, as did Yusuke and Absol, still smiling. The group arrives at a school where Tsukasa seems to be attending. They overheard students talking about the monsters attacking the school. Dragonic hums, aware what monsters they were talking about, but Tsukasa beats him to it, revealing to the group. The Orphnic, monsters that were once humans till they died through a certain event. It can be traumatic, cruel, or unable to move on to the afterlife. Natsumi and Yusuke both blink, surprised that he knew that. Tsukasa pulls out the decadriver and two let out an ah, getting it. Tsukasa nods, though the only part he wants to understand is who Faiz is and what exactly is the problem in this world. Just then a commotion is heard. The group turns to see four seemingly popular bullying on a girl in her camera, as well as photos she was taking. This annoys Tsukasa as he walks up towards them and picks up the camera. He checks on it, rather impressed. He walks up to the bullies, unaware of him, until Tsukasa takes a photo shot. Flashing in each of their faces, he yells, Say cheese. The group is taken out of surprise by the flashes. The four photos come out and Tsukasa studies and scoffs at how terrible they were, besides his ability unable to take photos. No, your images on these photos look disappointing. Tsukasa expresses, stomping on the photos on each of the bullies' heads. The main leader glares menacing as he calls this new kid coldly. Beat it, Kerr. We'll talk to you in. Tsukasa leans with a gazing look at the so-called leader and tells him off firmly. I don't like bullies. Beat it. The young boy snaps about doing something, but Tsukasa then points his finger at him and then the rest of his group, warning each of them. I won't ask again. Beat it. The group glares and just walks away before the leader tells him off. Another time, Kerr. Tsukasa waves with a smug smirk as the four left. He then walks up to the girl, who was pulled by a young boy that the group were picking on. Is this yours? Tsukasa asks, showing the camera. The girl nods kindly. He smiled, handing it over to her, even praising her camera. I like how you custom it. Not bad. The girl blushed, thanking him. Tsukasa and friends were taken inside the school to the library by the girl named Yuri and the shy boy named Takumi, offering them tea. Yusuke sneezes loudly, rubbing his nose. He apologizes. explaining that he's allergic. Takumi blushes, not saying a word as he drags his chair a few inches away from him. Tsukasa notices this but doesn't bother making a scene. Natsumi then asks about the 4 bullies that were picking on her. Yuri tells them upsetly, they're the lucky clover, the popular kids. If anyone gets in their radar, they will destroy that person. Tsukasa scoffs, recalling his time in school, how he was also bullied about his sister's condition. And well, let's say he got even with them in the most devastating way possible. They're a bunch of bastards. Takumi begins to express angrily that Lucky Clover thinks they rule the school and can break anyone down like they were trash. They don't care about anyone. Especially not Yuri-san's photos. Takumi, Yuri mutters softly to see her friend like this. Single quote ellipsis single quote. Tsukasa doesn't say a word, staring at Yuri's photo collection. He then recalled the day on his birthday that Seo gave him that camera. She bought it because he enjoys pictures and images. Tsukasa smiles a bit and tells Yuri as he slides the book back to her. Don't stop taking these photos. You have a friend who enjoys them. Yuri blushes as Takumi is taken back. Tsukasa then stands up and walks away. Natsumi watches, asking where he was going, but Tsukasa just waves with his back hand without responding. Tsukasa walks outside with Dragonic on his shoulders, asking the young man as he adjusts his fedora downward with a small smirk on his face. What's the plan, Tsukasa? The Orphnik and Faiz had their fights here from what we've heard. Then this school is the key to their connection, most likely students or teachers. Tsukasa concludes, figuring there must be a connection to the Orphnik and Faiz with this school. The dragon hums, pretty astonished he came to such a theory. He agrees about saying it but gets interrupted by another voice concluding, then Faiz must be someone of the Lucky Clover. No, Tsukasa-san? Tsukasa and Dragonic startle and turn to see Daiki, leaning on a tree, seemingly waiting for them. He waves hello while smiling. Kato, Tsukasa mutters seriously with Dragonic pointing out to that theory. A hunch basically because those kids aren't at all heroic to be Faiz. Daiki just smirks walking up to Tsukasa and calls him out relaxed. Possibly, but how about Tsukasa-san? Want to challenge me? Me, challenge you? You're not exactly impressing me. Tsukasa scoffs at such an idea walking past him. Kato hums, figuring as much as he taunts him with a sly grin. If you intend to get in my way, then accept my challenge, unless the so-called decade is afraid. Those words struck a nerve with Tsukasa. Not the part that he knows he is decade, but the part that he was afraid of. Smirking, Tsukasa turns to face him and accepts, pointing his index finger at him. Gladly, Kato smirks as he waves once more and walks away. Dragonic groans, not liking that challenge, as he asks Tsukasa, "You sure about this? As much as this does feel fishy." Tsukasa doesn't have a good lead to who Faiz could be or where the Orphnik could be. It's a good start since we have no leads who Faiz is. He states pretty sure about it. Tsukasa then smirks, adding sluggishness. Besides, it would be good to make those kids look bad. Dragonic sighs following his lead, though this all feels like they are puppets on strings. Tsukasa confronts the Lucky Clover and challenges them to a game of tennis. You dare to challenge us to tennis? One of the members calls him out coldly. Tsukasa smirks at this and taunts him. Scared I might embarrass your popularly status? He growls as the leader holds him back and accepts. Very well, worm. We'll accept your challenge. Tsukasa smirks as they move their confrontation to a tennis court, facing off against a member who was best in tennis. That is if you can keep up with us. He calls him out, warming up, and proceeds with the first swing. Only to Tsukasa to backswing the ball, and it hits back right past the boy and onto the fence. The other Lucky Clover members are speechless with Tsukasa smirking. Sorry, but there is nothing I'm bad at, Tsukasa proclaims overconfidence while pointing the racket at his opponent, before muttering to himself a bit hesitate. Except for taking photos. Dragonic hovers next to him, sweat dropping, advising him. There are classes on taking photos better. Tsukasa refuses to reply back to that, though it gets him into thinking and asks the dragon, changing subjects. Is there a world of the Prince of Tennis? Dragonic slowly grins, just telling him, I'll take you there another time. Tsukasa smirks as he resumes the game, even taunting that he can take on 2 of them with 2 rackets. He easily handles 2 number 3 of the male Lucky Clover members all at once, even able to create a twister out of his spinning. This shocks them as the leader finally speaks up, aware who he is. So this is your power, Faiz? Tsukasa raises an eyebrow and utters in protest, Faiz? You're Faiz. Wrong cur. He replies as he turns and transforms into an Orphnik. Tsukasa is taken back as he fires a blast from the palm of his hand at him. Tsukasa tries repelling with 1 racket and it does the job, except it destroys the top of it. Then the other male transforms also into an Orphnik leap at Tsukasa, who swings his other racket but he tears through it. Tsukasa is left speechless, distancing him from them, but the third takes on his Orphnik form and tackles Tsukasa into the ground. Oh, so they were the Orphnik. Small coincidence. Small world. Dragonic proclaims with a nervous grin, hovering over the young man, getting up annoyed. Tsukasa rolls his eyes, strapping on the decadriver around his waist. He gazes at the 3 male monsters and says with a small smirk, pulling out and tapping on the decade card in front of them, I guess take out 3 birds with 1 stone. Henshin. He thrusts the card into the belt and pushes the handles forward. Kamen ride. Decade. Tsukasa proclaims, transforming and becoming Decade, wiping his hands together. He engages the 2 Orphnik, but then the third male of the group transforms into his own monster form, attacking Decade too. Decade is pushed aside, but he wasn't bested yet, pulling out the Blade Kamen ride card. Kazuma. I'll be borrowing your soul. Decade proclaims, thrusting the card into the card inserter of his belt and pushes the handles forward. Kamen ride. The decadriver proclaims as Decade transforms into Kamen Rider Blade with his main sword weapon too. Blade. The Orphniks are shocked as Decade Blade comes charging at them, slashing each one with his sword. Decade Blade then pulls out an attack ride card and slides it into the belt. Attack ride. Mach. The decadriver announces as Decade Blade moves with great speed, slashing the monsters with unseen speed. The Orphniks are not best yet as they came at his back, but Decade Blade pulls out another card and dunks it into the belt without turning around. Attack ride metal. The decadriver proclaims as Decade Blade turns metal and the Orphnoches attacks with ease. Decade Blade turns, reverted back, as he taps on the final attack ride card. It ends with this. He proclaims, thrusting the card into the decadriver as it announces after he pushes the handles forward. Final attack ride. Decade Blade takes a jumping pose as electricity courses through his body. He then leaps up high and performs a rider kick engulfed in electricity. Blade. The 3 Orphnik panic as Decade is about to land his finishing rider kick, but then the female of the Lucky Clover transforms into her Orphnik form and intercepts Decade Blade's kick with her own, tossing the rider backwards. Decade Blade is pushed rolling but quickly gets on 1 knee. So if you're not Faiz, then don't get in our way or else. She threatens him as the 4 monsters jump away. Decade Blade watches as he reverts back to Tsukasa, scoffing. Bratty monsters. He mutters out, annoyed, with Dragonic nodding. The Lucky Clover got away from this new enemy, but it didn't solve their concern. But who Faiz is? If he wasn't Faiz, then who? The leader questions, pissed off at this. The others agreed as they need to get rid of Faiz now or never. Yo! The 4 suddenly stop by a voice calling out to them. They turn and spot the person calling to them, leaning on a wall as if waiting for them to show up. It was Daiki, waving at the 4 with a small grin. He then tells them in a taunting voice, I think I know who Faiz is if you want to hear me out. The Lucky Clover stares at him, untrusting yet It's worth a shot to finally get rid of Faiz. Tsukasa grunts irritatedly as he walks with Dragonic flying next to him, eating a rice ball happily. They were puzzled how that whole suggestion of Kato backfired. Strange. They don't know who Faiz was, but Daiki tricked you regardless. Dragonic states the obvious, which angers Tsukasa, who calls him out. Trick me? Like hell he did. The dragon eyes him with narrow eyes, just muttering as he takes another bite on his meal. Touchy. Tsukasa glares at him, annoyed by that since Dragonic is touchier than him. Just then his cell phone starts ringing. Tsukasa answers it, and it is Natsumi. Oi Natsumi, what's? He begins the conversation only for him to shut up and listens to what Natsumi is telling him. Tsukasa startles as Natsumi informs him that the Orphnik suddenly appeared and chased after Yuri, with Takumi leading her away. He then turns and runs with Dragonic puzzled and flies after him. Why target them? Tsukasa questions mentally, not getting the gist of this. Tsukasa and Dragonic arrive at Natsumi and even Yasuke's location. The two watch in surprise as Faiz is engaging the Lucky Clover while protecting Yuri. Tsukasa watches puzzled why Faiz would show up now, and where was that friend of Yuri's? He looks towards Yuri, who starts muttering, Takumi. He then widens his eyes, realizing who Faiz is. Then Faiz is, Dragonic begins to state, also overhearing, but before he could finish, Faiz is tossed away as his belt flies off his waist. This reverts Faiz back to reveal Takumi, grunting in pain. Takumi! Yuri yells out as the Orphnik proceeds to beat him down harder. Tsukasa-kun! Natsumi yells to Tsukasa to do something. He scoffs aware as he orders Yusuke. I know, Yusuke. My back. Yusuke nods as the two run up ahead. Tsukasa straps the Deca driver as Yusuke summons his belt around his waist. The two try to show as Tsukasa pulls out the Decade card and Yusuke place both hand palms on the sides of his waist, but before they could finish their lines the two other Orphnik intercepted and brush Yusuke to the sides while gripping Tsukasa's arm in place. Not this time. The monster tells him, not going to let him get their way. Tsukasa glares in a real grip. This time you will die. Faiz. The leader Orphnik proclaims, picking up the hurt Takumi for the finishing blow until he's suddenly slashed by the back by Absol in a psycho cut. He gasps, dropping Takumi as Absol slashes the other one with Night Slash, pushing the Orphnik female back. Absol! Natsumi shouts joyfully for the rescue. The other Orphnik is shocked as Absol dashes at him and performs play rough, smacking him around as Tsukasa kicks him, tossing him off him. Tsukasa rubs his arm as he tells Absol, "Good mutt." Absol barks, smiling. Tsukasa smirks, tapping his Decade card, but before he could transform a shot is heard and something hits between his legs. Tsukasa startles by the shot, turning around to face the one who tried to shoot him. Absol staggers as the shot comes from Kato, waving at all. You, the leading Orphnik utters out. Yusuke gets up grunting, helped by Natsumi, who spots him and mutters, recalling him. Is that Daiki-kun? Kato starts clapping to the Orphnik, congratulating them in a sarcastic tone. Well done, Lucky Clover. You guys sure amazed me, doing exactly what I wanted. Nani? The leader utters angrily. Kato smirks as he explains to them. All I wanted is the belt, and I knew you guys would do exactly like puppets should do, obey the puppet master. This enraged the Lucky Clover, with the female Orphnik threatening him. You dare mock us, human? Daiki's smile slowly fades into a serious expression as he pulls out his blue, black rectangle-shaped yellow-striped gun with two muzzles. Guess now I have to put an end to you losers before I take my belt. Don't take it too hard though. Kato declares, pointing his blaster gun at them. The Orphnik aren't as shocked as Natsumi, who widens her eyes heavily, not believing it. She begins to recall when her grandfather was alive that he showed her both the Deca driver he was about to finish and also the other, an incomplete blue well, he called it cyan-colored gun weapon. She asked why a gun and he said because it looked unique. That's... Dragonic starts uttering out in shock, recognizing the blaster too with Natsumi expressing in horror. The DN driver. He stole it? Tsukasa turns towards her, recalling the other invention of her grandfather. He looks back at Kato, for sure this man is a thief. Kato pulls out a rider card and smirks, sliding it into the card inserter of the DN driver, loading it up as it glows. Kamen ride. The DN driver announces as Daiki points it over his head and shouts with a serious tone. Henshin. He fires the weapon as a beam of light shoots out from it. The beam becomes 3 lights that surround Kato in a triangle with the DN symbol over him. The lights begin to transform him as the DN driver announces with the symbol descending over Kato's face. DN'd. Everyone watches in shock as Kato has transformed. He resembles Decade except bulker with rectangle-shaped chest armor with black rectangle-shaped lining with 2 yellow stripes on both sides of the shoulders and his colors being cyan blue with black and yellow. His eyeless helmet mask also had the same rectangle-shaped lining but blue with a gray mouth mask and a 4 round circles, metal strap in the middle. He wears a belt slightly similar to Decade's but with the DN symbol in blue on the center. Tsukasa widens his eyes, taken back now realizing this guy is much more dangerous than he thought he was. Kamen Rider. Yusuke utters out with Dragonic muttering irritatedly. DN'd. Tsukasa stares silent, just as annoyed. This guy is a rider and a thief. Takumi and Yuri watch, both very confused like the other Orphnik. Natsumi couldn't believe it, speechless. She recalls the night that the studio was broken in while she was doing an errand to get more photo material. She didn't understand who would have broken in until she discovered what was stolen was the completed DN driver but not the Deca driver. Why one and not both? And how did Kato know about the DN driver? Dean chuckles as he takes a step and suddenly moves so fast he blitzes past all the Orphnik, even kicking one of them into a wall with ease. Tsukasa watches this gazing at Dean who waves moving in front of the other 3 monsters. So he's the one who defeated Joker? He concludes mentally, no doubt his handiwork. How the Joker undead met his demise. Watching from afar is Narutaki, observing rather seriously. Deaned. To think it took you this long to finally reveal yourself. He tells himself still watching the fight play out. The Orphniks try to attack Deaned as one but their attempts couldn't touch him as he moves around them and easily smacks them aside. 1 version 4 sounds so unfair. Deaned comments on his odds before reaching out from the left side of his belt and pulls off 2 Kamen ride cards. Let's even the odds. He inserts each rider card into his DN driver, loading it as the weapon announces. Kamen ride. Dean takes aim at the Orphniks and fires. 2 beams shoot out of the gun but instead of hitting them the energy becomes 2 different riders. Rei. Kabuki. Both Kamen Rider Rei and Kabuki appear as they come charging at the surprised monsters. They strike each one even tossing one back hard. Tsukasa watches and has seen enough tapping on the Decade card. My turn now. Henshin. He declares thrusting the card into his belt and pushes its handles Kamen ride. Decade. The Deca driver proclaims with Tsukasa wiping his hands together as he transforms into Decade. He then proceeds to kick the Orphnik that caught him and starts beating him brutally. Dean sees this and scoffs bored with these monsters. He pulls out the final attack ride card and slides it into the card inserter of his blaster, loading it in. Final attack ride. The DN driver announces as Dean takes aim at the weaker Orphnik all while swirls of 9 blue, cyan color rings of cards appear before Dean. He takes aim and presses the trigger, firing a green and black beam through the rings while absorbing the 2 riders he summoned into his blast right towards the Orphnik. Deaned. The monster didn't have time to react as the blast hit through and he screams exploding into nothing. The other Orphnik stagger by this and the leader and the other male Orphnik run away with the female one hiding and gazing at Yuri helping Takumi up. Decade turns towards Dean who looks back. Both riders stare at the other silently until Dean speaks up, chuckling. You did well doing your part too, Tsukasa-san. Decade slowly clinches his hands tightly, finally responding back furious. Tricking me for your obsession is inhuman, Kato. Then do you plan to get in my way from the belt? Dean asks, pointing his blaster at him. Natsumi watches worryingly. I will always get in your way. Decade responds back, pulling out the ride booker into its blaster gun form and charges. Dean scoffs. Coming at him much faster, but Decade is able to see him coming, kicking him backwards, which doesn't do any damage. Decade then pulls an attack ride card and thrusts it into the card inserter of his belt. Attack ride. So be it, Dean states, pulling out his own and slides it into the DN driver. Attack ride. Both take aim with their blasters and fire with their drivers responding in sync. Blast, DIEND blast. Both riders fire a very similar multiple energy shot. Both shots repel and counter by the other until DN's blast begins to fire even faster, bypassing Decade's and hitting directly. Sparks fly out from Decade as he's tossed backward onto the ground. Natsumi panics, watching as Decade quickly stands up, shaken, not believing that just happens. His are stronger than mine's? He questions, not believing this, only for Dean to assure him, taunting. I'll always be stronger than you, Destroyer-san. Decade groans, charging at him as Dean did the same. As this went on, the female Orphnik made her move, attacking Yuri and tossing her back hard. Now to finish you off, she proclaims, going to end her. Takumi panics, getting up as he yells. Yuri! Decade staggers, realizing he doesn't have time for this nonsense as Dean unleashes unseen blows on him. Decade is pushed back as he pulls out the Kuga card and dunks it into the Deca driver. Kamen ride. Kuga. Decade transforms into Kuga. He comes charging, but Dean evades his punches while blasting him directly. Decade Kuga is pushed back harder, sparks still flying. He breathes. Needing more help, grabbing another card and slides it in. Attack ride. Illusion. The Deca driver announces as Kuga glows and 3 more copies appear beside him. The 3 pull out a card each, tapping on it before tossing into the card inserter of the belt. Form ride. Each Deca driver proclaims as each transforms into the other Kuga forms. Kuga Dragon. Kuga Pegasus. Kuga Titan. Natsumi startles heavily, as did Yusuke and Absol. Dragonic smirks a bit, glad Tsukasa is using his head and using the full potential Decade can do. Dean is surprised as Pegasus form fires its arrow shot so quickly that it strikes and sparks fly out. Dean yells. Stunned long enough for Dragon form to smack him multiple times with his staff, followed by Titan form swinging his sword, more sparks flying out. Decade Kuga mighty form then comes in with a barrage of punches and kicks, tossing Dean onto a light pole, actually snapping it in 2. Decade Kuga wipes his hands, now taunting Dean. Looks like Destroyer-san overestimate the thief. Dean slowly gets back up, chuckling, as he stands up way too quickly, barely taking any real damage. This staggers each Decade Kuga. I wonder about that. Dean questions as he pulls out 3 rider cards and slides them each into his blaster, loading them. Kamen ride. The DN driver announces as Dean fires 3 forward and the energy transforms into 3 different riders. G3. Garen. Zero Nose. Decade Kuga is surprised again. Not aware he could summon 3 at a time. Zero Nose comes charging while G3 and Garen attack with their blaster guns. The long-range attacks distract and damage each Decade, as Zero Nose blasting each one with 1 close energy shot from his own Gatling-like blaster, more sparks flying out from each Decade Kuga. Dean pulls out a card and slides it into his blaster, taking aim. Attack ride. Cross attack. The DN driver announces as each summoned rider performs their signature attacks, destroying each of the Decade copies with the original remaining. Also Tsukasa-san. Dean then adds, pulling out another card and slides it into the DN driver. Attack ride. Illusion. Decade Kuga watches in shock as Dean multiplies into 5 copies, each one firing at the original so badly it reverts him out of the Kuga form as he flies onto the ground hard while yelling, "Gah!" Decade rolls, stopping on the ground, panting heavily. He gazes at Dean as his copies and his summoned riders approach slowly. This irritated Decade, refusing to admit defeat to this thieving jackass. Decade gets back up and changes the ride Booker into its sword form as he thrusts an attack ride card into his belt. Attack ride. Slash. The Deca driver declares as Decade swings and fires multiple energy slashes, cutting through and destroying the summoned riders. The Deaned copies and even the original Deaned, who tanks the blows with sparks flying out. Final attack ride. Deaned, staggered partly by the barrage, looks ahead as Decade positions himself as the holographic cards materialize in a row and aim towards Deaned. Decade swings the sword through the first holographic card and fires a powerful magenta-colored energy slash, coursing and flying through each card before hitting and consuming Deaned. Exploding on impact. Decade pants heavily with Natsumi cheering joyfully. Tsukasa-kun got him. Decade swipes his sword, now turning towards the female Orphnik, causing problems. He walks towards her until he hears a voice. Attack ride. Barrier. Decade staggers, turning around, and they're out of the smoke as Deaned, surrounding in a unique barrier that tanks the final attack. Deaned brushes off from his shoulder. Natsumi is left speechless, as was Yusuke, not ever seeing someone survive Tsukasa's attacks like that. Nice try. Tsukasa-san. Dean says, amused as he resumes firing at Decade with the Dien driver, gasping out louder with more sparks flying out, without Decade able to help. Takumi watches as the female Orphnik is about to finish Yuri off. Not able to see this anymore, the young man erupts in fury. Leave Yuri alone. RAAWW. Takumi yells out as he suddenly transforms into a wolf-like Orphnik, charging with great speed at the female one and strikes her away from Yuri, who is left stunned. Natsumi sees this and gasps in surprise. Takumi is an Orphnik? This surprises Decade, turning only to get blasted again by Deaned, chuckling as he inserts a card into his Dien driver. Final attack ride. Decade, struggling to stand up straight, watches as Deaned takes aim and fires his powerful blast from the Dien driver. Deaned. Decade can't do a thing as the blast consumes him and explodes on impact. Gah! Decade yells out, crashing onto a wall and falls forward, reverted back with multiple injuries and bleeding. Yusuke is left speechless, as did Absol, while Natsumi lets out a shrieking scream of terror. Tsukasa-kun. She runs up to Tsukasa's aid, but Deaned intercepts her. He takes aim at the defeated Tsukasa, grunting, seemingly unconscious. You're done for. Tsukasa-san. Deaned declares, seemingly about to finish him off. Natsumi watches helpless as Deaned prepares to kill the unconscious Tsukasa until Dragonic suddenly appears right in front of him, threatening the rider. Shoot him and die. Deaned chuckles at such a weak threat from a little thing like him. He still fires instantly, but Dragonic quickly opens his jaw and swallows up the energy blasts instantly, chewing on them on top of that. Single quote ellipsis. Did you just? Deaned slowly says on the face he ate his attack only to get tail whipped by Dragonic, smacking him onto a tree. Deaned grunts as Dragonic comes right at his face and slams his claw, smashing him onto the ground, grinding him. Deaned grunts firing, but Dragonic moves around, evading his shots with ease as he tosses him back up before slamming his claw foot back hard. Deaned grinds his feet on the ground, grunting as he pulls out 3 rider cards and slides them into his blaster. Kamen ride. The Dien driver announces as Deaned fires, summoning 3 new riders. Guy, Chalice, Kiteros. Dragonic watches this and adjusts his fedora downward, covering his eyes. Deaned fires blasts as Guy comes charging. Dragonic, without looking, moves around his head dodging the energy shots as he leaps up and wraps his tail around Guy's rhino horn and lifts the rider up with so much ease before twirling and tossing him onto the ground. Chalice comes charging with both bladed weapon, but Dragonic ducks and leaps both swings as he thrusts a punch across his face helmet, thrusting him back off his feet. Kiteros comes charging with Clock Up with Deend moving with high speed, swinging for close combat, but Dragonic instantly grabs their attacking punch or kick and starts spinning while gripping on them. Deend grunts as Dragonic takes flight and slams them onto the other riders. All three summoned riders vanish with Deend taking too much damage, grunting. Natsumi watches speechless as she then sees someone rushes to Tsukasa and pulls him up, telling him, "Hey, get up, use your legs." Tsukasa just grunts, struggling to move. Natsumi and even Yusuke rush in and help Tsukasa up, bowing to the mister for helping them. Attack ride. Diend blast. Deend, annoyed and back up, fires multiple energy shots with great speed and Dragonic tears through all the shots without any difficulty. Dragonic smirks as he spits out multiple fireballs, instantly Deend, grunting, is done with this pesky lizard, sliding his final attack ride card into his Dien driver and takes aim. Final attack ride. Diend. The Dien driver proclaims as he Deend takes aim and fires his signature attack only for Dragonic to counter back, opening his fangs and swirls of fiery energy forming. Drago non-burst. Dragonic roars, breathing a destructive red flame blast. Both attacks clash and collide, exploding on impact. Deend braces as Dragonic blows away the smoke with the flapping of his wings, gazing with such intimidation from his dragon eyes alone. Deend realizes his chances to get the Faiz belt wouldn't happen even when the female Orphnic ran away and Takumi dud. That and collecting a dragon isn't going to happen. Okay, getting you in my collection isn't going to work. Deend proclaims as he warns the dragon with a slight chuckle. I'll get the belt later. Until next time. Dragonic growls, coming at him, but Deend quickly inserts a card into his blaster, loading it. Attack ride. Invisible. The Dien driver announces as Deend becomes invisible. Vanishing from everyone's sight, Dragonic scoffs as he could track him down, but it would be pointless. Cocky bastard. The dragon points out angrily, going to get even with him. Dragonic goes to pick up the Faiz belt, sighing. He turns to see Natsumi waking Tsukasa from the injury state he was in. Tsukasa-kun, please wake up, she pleads to him, never seeing him in such a bad state before. She never had to worry about this kind of stuff before, since Tsukasa is capable of fighting without any problems, but this was completely new. The stranger checks on Tsukasa and smiles, relieving Natsumi's worries. Don't worry, he's fine, just take him home. Dragonic agrees as he tosses the belt to Yusuke and asks him, Yusuke-kun, talk to Takumi-kun and give him back his belt. Yusuke nods as he heads off. Dragonic eyes the strange and spots the spade symbol dog tag around his neck. The young man eyes the strange creature before Dragonic winks and tells him, thank you. The young man just smiles softly as he tells them, I'll help you guys take him home. Natsumi smiles, bowing to his request as he picks up Tsukasa only for a voice to call out, let go. Suddenly Tsukasa, fully awake, slaps the guy gripping on him, falling on the ground but grunts, pushing himself up. Tsukasa-kun. Natsumi staggers that he's regained consciousness. Tsukasa grunts in pain, but he doesn't care, pulling himself back up. He starts limping, to the other's surprise, as he just mutters out angrily, I gotta do one thing first. Natsumi didn't follow, but Dragonic had a good feeling. The stranger sighs as he bows to them and leaves. Absol just watches, still silent, whining to herself, rather saddened. Night arrives as Tsukasa returns to the Hikari studio, fully soaked. He followed Takumi with Yusuke and they watched as the young man tossed the Faiz briefcase with belt into the water, about no longer wanting to jeopardize Yuri, especially now that she knows the full truth about him. Tsukasa, like any normal person who was already badly injured, dived into the water to Yasuke's horror. He leapt after him and managed to pull him out with Tsukasa regaining the belt. Wrapped in towels, Natsumi scolds the two of them but mainly Tsukasa, who still looks like crap. How could you be so stupid to toss yourself into the river to get the Faiz belt? Tsukasa narrows his eyes away from her nagging. Natsumi glares even further upset, calling him out angrier. You could have gotten worst or drown or get sick or anything else. Once more Tsukasa did not even reply. Natsumi groans, stomping her foot and yells. Baka! She storms out not noticing Yuri just standing there. Tsukasa eyes her and sighs, figuring she would come to see him. Yuri first apologizes for coming to him while he looks badly hurt, but she asks for his advice. She admits her concerns for Takumi. First hiding the fact he was Faiz, but second that he's also an orphanic. Tsukasa listens, not saying much though admitting why Takumi kept this a secret from her and everyone else. You shouldn't be afraid of him, Yuri. Tsukasa tells her to the young girl's surprise. He then adds with a firm face. If Takumi was a monster, he wouldn't care for the things that are insignificant but beautiful. Yuri is left silent, not realizing that Takumi wasn't lying about how much he enjoys their time taking photos. She blushes, hoping he is okay. Thank you. She thanks him with a bow before leaving, hoping to see Takumi tomorrow. Tsukasa doesn't say a word watching her leave. Alone. He grunts due to his injuries as he gets up weakly. He starts dragging himself to the stairs but stops, knowing Natsumi was hiding behind the wall overhearing that whole thing. She frowns sadly. Not meaning to be mean to him, but she feels like Tsukasa doesn't care about himself, or her concerns and worries for his well-being. Natsumi looks up to him and hesitates at first but does ask him in a saddened voice. Single quote ellipsis. Why do you always push yourself so much? I thought you didn't care. Tsukasa doesn't say a word as he grips on himself by the wall, still in pain. He gazes at Natsumi waiting for a response. He grunts, beginning to say annoyed. You think after that damn Kato beating me down that I will admit I'm weak or pathetic to reveal a big part about myself just to ease your damn worries, Natsumi-kan? No. You're not that type of person. Natsumi, in a sad voice, admits, though she then adds with a small smile. But I'm happy you show that you do care though. Tsukasa makes no comment as he scoffs irritated. Natsumi smiles giggling as she encourages him with a wink. You'll beat him next time because you're perfect in nearly everything. Again Tsukasa makes no comment, though he cracks a smirk. If Natsumi believes in him, then he'll make sure her words come true. Of course, first he needs to walk up these stairs before him as his limbs shake in pain. Single quote ellipsis. Natsumi-kan, help me up the stairs. Please. Tsukasa finally speaks up asking for her help. Natsumi forms a small smirk saying with a soft giggle. Baka. She walks up to him and holds him by the waist, helping Tsukasa walk up the stairs step by step. Dragonic watches from afar with a small smile on his face. The next day arrived as Tsukasa, dressed in his own clothes and wrapped in bandages around his head and underneath his clothing thanks to Natsumi's help, is ready to save this world and hopefully make Kato pay for last time. He eats his toast and coffee and walks out only to be stopped by Natsumi. She frowns, not wanting him to get hurt, but Tsukasa just eyes her unfazed and walks past her. Natsumi sighs, figuring as much, and just pleads to him, wanting him to come home. Tsukasa-kun, don't force yourself. Tsukasa stops momentarily and slightly smirks, just responding. I won't. He turns to Yusuke and orders him. Yusuke, you better. I'll watch the school. Go find Takumi. Yusuke responds, figuring that would be what Tsukasa would ask of him. Tsukasa scoffs and walks outside as he carries the Faiz briefcase. He begins walking, still partly hurt and seemingly alone, seemingly. You don't have to come. Tsukasa says. Bothered as Dragonic hovers behind his back, grinning as he flies to his side and responds carefree. Why? Because I might make you not look cool? Referring to the mud, Tsukasa corrects him looking at Absol, walking beside him. She looks up at the human and barks. Absol, Dragonic nods with his arms crossed, telling him, she feels pity for you. Tsukasa scoffs, annoyed that anyone would feel pity for him. He does though, stops on his tracks and looks down at depressed Absol. To think this mutt has bitten him probably more times than any dog to live would feel sad for him. Tsukasa just smirks, kneeling down the best he could and pets her. Absol blushes, licking his hand. Tsukasa nods, petting her again before he resumes his walk. The group arrives near the pier as Tsukasa had a feeling Takumi would be there, and there he sees him, as well as Kato shooting at the defenseless kid. Leave the kid alone. Kato! Tsukasa calls him out angrily. Kato stops his firing and gazes towards Tsukasa. He smirks and responds with amusement. Tsukasa-san. Their Daiki staggers to see the Faiz briefcase. So Tsukasa had it. He thought this kid was hiding from him, but instead, it was Tsukasa. How ironic, as Daiki smirks. Tsukasa approaches but stops towards Takumi, still on the ground. He kneels down and pulls the kid back up, ordering him. I'll deal with him. You need to be a man and show Yuri who you really are, Takumi. But Takumi starts protesting. Not confident in himself to face her. Daiki scoffs, aiming the DN driver at Tsukasa, not liking to be ignored, but Absol leaps in between him, barking. Daiki raises an eyebrow while Absol glares calmly, hesitant. No buts, now go. Your friend still wants to believe in you. Tsukasa tells him to Takumi's surprise. He hesitates but nods, running off. This leaves Tsukasa, Dragonic and Absol to confront Kato as Tsukasa walks up right in front of the thief. Kato, killing a boy. Really? Tsukasa calls him out on his cruel nature for getting anything even at the cost of killing someone. Anyone is my enemy when it comes to my treasure. Kato expresses as he lifts his blaster right at Tsukasa's face. That includes you most of all, Tsukasa-san. Tsukasa smirks. Figuring as much before telling him with a stern face, shaking the Faiz briefcase. There's something more precious than this. Something more valuable and important. Kato scoffs at his nonsense and threatens him seriously. I won't ask again. Make me. Tsukasa just responds by swinging the briefcase, which Kato ducks. Tsukasa now pulls out the Decadriver and tries to place it around his chest, but Kato then kicks him back. Tsukasa twirls and dodges, until he feels something is wrong. He looks down his hand and the Decadriver is on his hand but not the ride booker. He looks up to see Kato waving the binder, having snatched it. How about we trade? Daiki taunts him with Tsukasa glaring. Dragonic sighs, going to have to take it, but before he could, an aurora curtain suddenly appears and moves towards Tsukasa, swallowing him as he vanishes. Dragonic panics, as did Absol. Daiki blinks, just muttering out, not surprised. Narutaki, huh? The dragon turns, gazing at the human, glaring that he knew who Narutaki was. Daiki eyes him and tells him, Dragon, you can track Tsukasa-san? To take the belt? Dragonic calls him off for not buying that he cares about Tsukasa. Daiki smirks, admitting it. The dragon eyes the ride booker, knowing well he can snatch it, but to get to Narutaki will be a different story. He hasn't been able to track him even with his powers, so he might recommence things. How about we discuss a deal? The dragon suggests. Daiki actually smirks, liking the sound of that. Tsukasa blinks while looking around as he finds himself in a rocky beach-like location. He looks ahead and makes an annoying expression, staring right at Narutaki. Tsukasa immediately face palms, not believing the worst of times this man has to be a dick. Seriously? Tsukasa calls him out and is bothered that this man is in his way again. Decade. I did promise that. Narutaki begins proclaiming the destruction of the destroyer only to get immediately interrupted by an exhausted Tsukasa declaring the rest of his proclamation. You will kill me because I'm Saturn, Lucifer. The devil incarnate blah blah blah. Narutaki glares extremely enraged with Tsukasa telling him still recovering and not in the mood for his stupid games. I'm not in a good mood. So how do you plan to kill me this time? Narutaki doesn't say a word, snapping his fingers. An aurora curtain appears and vanishes quickly, revealing Kamen Rider Ryuga. Tsukasa scoffs at this uttering. Ryuga? Seriously? Couldn't you use anyone more different like G4 or Dark Kiva or Hell Dark Kabuto? You think of me as a joke, Decade? Narutaki demands. Furious at his insults. Tsukasa slowly forms a smirk opening up the Faiz briefcase and straps on the Faiz driver. No. I just don't find you funny at all. Tsukasa proclaims as he opens up the Faiz phone. Narutaki startles as Tsukasa presses the dial 3 times as the phone responds. Standing by. Henshin. Tsukasa shouts, sliding the phone into the slot of the belt as it glows. Comply. However, as the phone begins to commence the transformation, a burst of red electricity flies out and shocks Tsukasa partly as the belt flies off his waist. Tsukasa just blinks, kinda not seeing this coming. There was an awkward silence with Tsukasa ultimately uttering out in amazement. Oh, wasn't expecting. Sadly, he was cut off as Ryuga suddenly appears right in front of him and smacks him onto the ground. The Dark Rider picks him up and starts choking him one-handed. Now you will die, Decade. Narutaki declares with a sinister smirk on his face. Tsukasa groans, kicking Ryuga off him but no budge. This was not what he wanted for today. Suddenly an aurora curtain manifests as a barrage of shots fly out of it, striking Ryuga as the Dark Rider is sent back hard. Nani? Narutaki utters in shock at this. Tsukasa lands on his feet. Breathing heavily, he turns to see Dragonic emerging with Daiki, twirling the DN driver as he did. That was quick, Tsukasa mutters. Dragonic smirks. Glad they arrive on time as he flies up and lands on Tsukasa's shoulder. We talked, the dragon states with Kato adding. Temporary allied. The dragon scoffs, gazing at Ryuga and tells the thief. Have fun. Kato smirks, loading the Deaned card into the DN driver and shouts, taking aim up and fires. Henshin, Kamen Ride. DIEND. The DN driver announces as Kato transforms into Deaned and engages Ryuga with his much faster speed, trashing Ryuga backwards. Tsukasa picks up the Faiz gear to Dragonic's surprise. Immediately questioning him. Were you? I thought it would work. Tsukasa responds still in awe that the belt didn't allow him to transform. Dragonic sweat drops surprised he doesn't know this so he tells him. I should have mentioned this but the Faiz belts only work on humans with Orphnic DNA or Orphnics. Pure or half-breed. Tsukasa turns towards the dragon with a startled, confused face. Dragonic nods as he then adds with a grin. Luckily this wasn't the Kaisha belt. You would be dead by now. Tsukasa scoffs not in a humorous mood. He turns back as Deaned is easily overpowering Ryuga. Bored, Deaned pulls out the Kiva Kamen Ride card. A monster for a monster. He states as he loads the card into the DN driver and fires it forward. Kamen Ride. Kiva. The DN driver announces as Deaned summons Kiva. The summoned Kiva starts fighting Ryuga almost beastly-like, striking and kicking the Dark Rider backwards. Ryuga then summons forth Dragblacker, unleashing its black fireballs. Kiva and Dean easily dodge around the attacks with Dean shooting at the dragon. The black dragon, roaring furious, swirls around its master as Ryuga levitates off his feet, engulfed in darkness. Dean scoffs at this, pulling out a Final Form Ride card and loads it into his blaster. Final Form Ride. The DN driver announces as Dean fires a shot at Kiva who starts transforming into its giant bow form, flying to Dean's possession. Kiva Arrow. Ryuga doesn't care as Dragblacker breathes its black flames upon his back, propelling him into a fiery rider kick right towards Deend. So long. Deend just commends as he quickly loads the final attack ride card into his blaster and takes aim. Final attack ride. Kiva. The DN driver declares as Deend fires the arrow shot, tearing right through not just the attacking Ryuga, destroying him instantly, but also the Dragblacker destroying the dragon too. The Kiva arrow vanishes as Deend transforms with a smug smirk. Deend. Narutaki declares furious at the rider. Daiki just salutes to him as Tsukasa summons an aurora curtain and takes them away. Narutaki is left alone and enraged. Why would he get in the way? Is this Dian's method of getting what he wants first? Absol waits as an aurora curtain appears and the three walk out. Tsukasa gazes at Daiki. Not thankful for the save and shouldn't thank him, but knowing Natsumi, she'll lecture him if he doesn't at least thank him. So he'll fake it just so she doesn't nag. Well, I suppose Tsukasa begins to say his thank you, only to find himself being aimed at by Kato using his DN driver. He glares annoyed, muttering out, "Seriously?" Dragonic coughs as he explains to him adjusting his fedora downward. "We made a trade." Tsukasa stares at the dragon, having an idea what Dragonic is trying. He eyes back at Kato and scoffs, handing him the Faiz gear. Kato smirks, snatching it as he then tosses him back his ride booker. Tsukasa catches it and checks to see if everything is in order. He then turns his back and starts walking away. "And where are you going?" Daiki questions him, surprised he's not trying to fight him for the belt. Tsukasa refuses to turn to face him, simply telling him, "I told you, there's something more important than that." Daiki gazes puzzled as Tsukasa runs off. Dragonic smirks, eyeing the thief and tells him, "He means the belt. Now if you excuse us." The dragon flies off with Absol following him. Daiki is left alone, looking down at the Faiz gear. Dragonic and Absol catch up to Tsukasa as the dragon warns him, sensing evil up ahead. "I sense the Orphnik are making their move." Tsukasa scoffs, figuring as much. He straps on the Deca driver, declaring, "Then I guess the hero should get there." Dragonic hums with a small smirk. Then he felt something as Absol barks, sensing it too. "Absol." Tsukasa stops as they all suddenly move to the right as a pair of missiles hit where they were explode. The three are sent flying back but thankfully not badly hurt. Tsukasa gets up coughing to look up who did that. It was Kamen Rider G4, firing his missile launchers at the pair. "He took me seriously?" Tsukasa questions, more awed by Narutaki's insane obsession towards him to the point of summoning more Dark Riders to kill him of his suggestions. "Lovely," Tsukasa states, opening the ride booker to pull out the decade card until he stops himself as someone else steps in front of him. "Hey, you mind? I'm going to deal with him." "Sorry. But I got this." Tsukasa Kadoya, the one appearing in front of him, declares, revealing to be the same guy who saved him earlier from Deend. Tsukasa scoffs, figuring it was this guy again, and already theorizes who he is. "Let me guess, another rider from the original world? Who are you?" The young man just smiles a bit, answering him, "A rider from the world of Blade. Just call me Kazuma Kenzaki." Tsukasa startles, muttering out, "Kazuma? Then, I came here to kill you, no offense. But I don't want to get in your way from helping this world." Kenzaki tells him honestly, though Tsukasa scoffs at that reply. "Humble, aren't you?" Kenzaki straps on the blade buckle, wrapping around his waist. He simply tells him to take on a fighting pose. "Go help this world's rider before I change my mind." Tsukasa doesn't say a word but nods. Kenzaki nods as he declares, "Henshin." He flips the front of the belt as it announces, "Turn up." A blue rectangle screen with a beetle symbol manifests. Kenzaki walks up to it slowly as he walks through it and transforms into Kamen Rider Blade. Holding up his sword, Blade charges forward at G4 as the Dark Rider fires multiple rockets. Blade slides 2 cards as he enters his metal state and tanks the missiles before slashing the rider with electrical slashes. Sparks fly out from G4 as Blade smacks him down with strong blows. Tsukasa watches as this man is nothing like the Kazuma he's met. He'll be a troublesome opponent if he fights him without a plan. Dragonic watches and advises him. We better, Tsukasa-kun. Tsukasa raises an eyebrow and turns. He raises an eyebrow as it is Natsumi, driving on the machine Decatur poorly and scared, moving almost like a snail. Dragonic and Absol sweat drop. Natsumi-kan? Tsukasa questions as she stops right in front of him. Natsumi breathes heavily. Not thinking she is going to survive driving this, but she had to take it to Tsukasa, realizing he forgot to take it. She gets off from the driving position and tells Tsukasa, tossing his helmet with gloves to him. You ride. Tsukasa smirks, nodding. He puts on his helmet, putting on his goggles as well as gloves as he mounts on the driver's seat. Ramming up as Natsumi grabs on his waist, Tsukasa drives off with Dragonic flying after them and Absol chasing after them. Tsukasa and Natsumi arrive at the school to see the students on the corner terrorized by the Orphnik, and Takumi in his Orphnik form tries to fight them as Yusuke as Kuga until he's slammed through a wall, depowering him. Oh no, Yusuke! Natsumi yells out in shock. Tsukasa, however, continues driving as he slams his bike onto one Orphnik, sending him flying back. Natsumi's eyes spin as Tsukasa gets off his bike and proclaims, pulling up his goggles. Yo, seem you runts have been having a blast. The other 2 Orphnik watch as the third one gets up angrily. Tsukasa removes his helmet as Natsumi goes to help Yusuke. Shame I gotta put an end to your fun. Tsukasa proclaims, pointing his finger at all 3. You don't expect you, Kur, that fool, will be able to beat us this time? The leader Orphnik declares as he points at the damaged Orphnik form Takumi, grunting as he tries to lift himself up. The remaining Lucky Clover begins stating that a human or any other Orphnik dares oppose them will meet a grim death. Tsukasa scoffs at their nonsense, simply stating as he 2 points at Takumi. Whether you're an Orphnik or human doesn't matter. He just wants to protect what's important to him. The female Orphnik hisses, gazing at the camera and photo album on the ground as they had taken from Yuri. That little thing? She questions angrily. Tsukasa instead corrects her seriously. It's because it's small that it needs to be protected. You Kur, who are you? The Orphnik leader demands, more than irritated by this human pest. Tsukasa just smirks, opening up the ride booker and pulls out the decade card, holding it up front at the 3 monsters. Just a passing through common rider. Remember that, Tsukasa announces loudly, not going to let these brats dominate anyone including himself. I alone decide where I journey. Henshin. He slides the card into the Decadriver, pushing the handles forwards. Kamen ride. Decade. The Decadriver proclaims while Tsukasa wipes his hands together, transforming into Decade. He and Takumi charge at the 3 Orphnik, engaging them, but their odds are still against them as it was 2 version 3 and Tsukasa is still recovering from the last battle. Pushed back hard, Decade pulls out a rider card and declares dunking it. Once more, he pushes the handles as the Decadriver declares transforming him, Kamen ride. Blade. Decade transforms into Blade as he comes swinging but immediately gets blocked by the Orphnik. That form won't work twice, Kur. He announces, delivering multiple attacks on Decade Blade, sparks flying out all over. He grunts as the other Orphnik joins in slashing him. He's pushed back hard, dropping to a knee. Natsumi watches in panic. Decade Blade pants heavily as the other Orphnik tosses Takumi out of his monster form onto the ground. One of the Orphnik starts laughing like a maniac as he walks up to Yuri's camera. These photos, this camera. He begins to declare, raising his right over it. Takumi lets out a scream to not do it, but the monster ignores his pleas, stomping his foot and destroying the camera into pieces. Yuri breaks into tears as Takumi is horrified. Decade Blade sees this. Squeezing his hands tightly, the Orphnik then proceeds to fire blasts on the photo album, burning all the photos. Utter trash compared to US. Now playing Ost. Journey Through the Decade Remix Ride Symphony. This burns a fire in Tsukasa's heart. Something he has been struggling to hold back since Seo's death. But right now this rage, hearing the deep words of his sister's begging voice. This stir the destroyer's emotions as Decade Blade stands back. What would you know about things that come from the heart? The Orphniks stagger by Decade Blade's words, yelling as he's never expressed before. Natsumi and Yusuke watch and then see Decade Blade glowing in a magenta-like aura, burning almost like fire. That camera and those photos aren't insignificant or trash. They are precious and worth more than your damn powers put together. Decade Blade declares furiously, burning up his power even angrier. I won't let those to bully away the dreams and treasures of others. Watching from afar, Daiki observes still holding on to the Faiz gear. Kenzaki also watches from afar, wondering what he'll do. Decade Blade's energy builds up more, squeezing his hands tighter. If he must become this destroyer, so be it, but he'll do it under his terms, no one else's. I refuse to tolerate those who destroy what matters most. Even if I must be the one to destroy. I choose to destroy what is not desired. Decade proclaims loudly about charging at the Orphnik, but before he does the Decadriver begins to glow in a magenta shine. This surprises Decade as did everyone else. What the? Daiki mutters, never seeing this before. Dragonic flies up next to Decade with such an overjoying expression. He checks and nods, proclaiming, "The Decadriver respond to your desires, Tsukasa-kun." Decade watches as the ride booker suddenly shoots out 3 different cards glowing in the same light floating in front of him. The cards glow and become brand new form ride cards. Behold, the super form ride card. Dragonic proclaims awe. Decade Blade grabs the cards and examines them, showing the super forms of Kuga, Kiva and Blade. Super form ride? He questions, never seeing these cards before. Dragonic nods as he advises him. Use it with Blade and unlock Blade's greater potential. Decade eyes the dragon and chuckles, getting it. I get the gist now. He replies, putting away the rest except the Blade super form ride card, and thrusts it into the card inserter of his belt, pushing the handles forward. Super form ride. The Decadriver proclaims as Decade Blade starts to glow and transforms into the winged Blade Jack form. Blade Jack form. This surprises everyone, with Kenzaki smiles, not expecting this. Daiki is taken back, never seeing this before. Awesome. Natsumi utters, blushing, with Yusuke nodding. The Orphnik grunts, annoy coming at Decade Blade, swiping at him and hitting nothing but the air with the rider gone. He starts looking around and then gasps, looking to see the rider flying in the sky due to his metal wings. Whoa, he can fly. Yusuke utters out, astonished. Decade Blade dives down, slashing the Orphnik with the enhanced Blade Rouser with such speed. The Orphnik is tossed back and forth before he's kicked backwards. Decade Blade pulls out the final attack ride and tosses upward as he somersaults himself, timing it so well that the card in midair slides into the Decadriver's card inserter as he pushes the handles. Final attack ride. The Decadriver proclaims as the somersaulting Decade Blade flies downward towards the Orphnik as the Blade Rouser is engulfed in electricity as it grows an energy beam through its blade. The monster watches helpless as Decade Blade swings his sword and cuts right through him, exploding in an electrical explosion. Blade. Everyone is taken back by this as Kenzaki just smirks softly before walking away, knowing their fight will come soon. Decade Blade Jack form descends back on the ground and he reverts back to Decade, wiping his hands. End of Ost, bastard. The female Orphnik yells out, charging at Decade, but suddenly gets blasted backwards. Decade turns to see Kato doing the deed. Kato. Daiki eyes him with no comment before looking at Takumi. He smirks, holding the Faiz gear, and shouts, tossing the briefcase. Boy, catch! Takumi startles as he tosses the box back to him. Puzzled, Takumi just ignores it as he opens it up and straps on the Faiz belt, followed by dialing the Faiz phone. Standing by, the phone proclaims as Takumi calls out, raising the phone over his head. Henshin. He moves his arm down and slides the phone into the belt as it announces, transforming him into Faiz. Complete. Now transformed, Faiz comes at the two Orphnik and strikes devastating blows with the Faiz shot, punching both monsters back. Decade scoffs, though impressed. The two Orphniks stand up, though, with the leader of Lucky Clover calling him out angrily. Damn you, Faiz. I want. Faiz starts saying, squeezing his other fist, determined in what he wants to do. I want to protect what Yuri and I care for. Suddenly 4 cards pop out from the ride booker as Decade catches them, watching as they become Faiz cards. He nods, grabbing on the final form ride card, and declares, then let's make that happen. He thrusts the card into the Deca driver and pushes the handles. Final form ride. The Deca driver announces as Decade approaches Faiz and tells him, this might tickle a bit. Faiz doesn't follow, but it is too late as Decade taps and grabs onto his back. What's this? Faiz utters out as his body glows and transforms, becoming into a large laser cannon as Decade grabs on it. Faiz blaster. The two Orphniks startle by this as Decade takes aim with the blaster. Finishing blow. Decade declares, pulling out the final attack ride card and dunks it into the belt, proclaiming, final attack ride. He takes aim and fires a massive red energy blast right towards the two monsters. Faiz. The two remaining Orphnik were destroyed completely. Decade tosses the blaster aside as it transforms back to Faiz before reverted back to Takumi, dazed by what just happened. Tsukasa doesn't answer him and tells him instead with his arms crossed, kid, go to her. Takumi startles a bit but nods, admitting he's right. He gulps, trying to be strong as he walks up to Yuri. The other students feared him since they saw him transformed. Takumi frowns, admitting he's not welcome, however Yuri accepts his hand. Takumi startles, surprised as Yuri smiles, wanting to create more pictures with him. Takumi slowly smiles as he nods, wanting to do that too. Tsukasa smirks while taking a photo of the two high schoolers. Nice pair at least, he comments with a small smile, looking at the photo of the pair. Tsukasa turns to the rubble of the building that was partly destroyed by the final attack ride. He walks up towards it with Dragonic flying next to him. There they see Daiki searching through the debris. Kato, Tsukasa begins to call him out, hoping he finally got the message, until Daiki pulls something out, the black golden Orga belt. Dragonic startles, questioning in surprise. Isn't that? Daiki grins, nodding, and replies that he is actually overjoyed. Awesome, right? It's a mountain of treasure. These belts are meant to fight or Phoenix, but the Emperor is more powerful, greater than Faiz. He stands up and grins at Tsukasa, thanking him. Like you said, Tsukasa-san. Something more valuable than the Faiz's belt. Tsukasa and Dragonic stare uneasy that he didn't get the message they were telling him. Kato has never felt this happy, eyeing his so-called rival. Yes. A rival suited for the best treasure hunter. You really are a more interesting version of you, Tsukasa-san. Daiki tells him, still smiling. Tsukasa raises an eyebrow, questioning him. Version? Kato starts walking away, but not before he tells him with a smirk. Until our next journey, Tsukasa-san. Tsukasa glares irritated. Daiki then adds, pointing at the dragon with a grin. You too, Gecko. Dragonic snaps and roars, breathing flames. Daiki dodges them and suddenly vanishes after walking past broken rubble. I'll burn you alive, Daiki Kato. Dragonic vows in a roar. Enraged by that man, Tsukasa glares at where Kato was and finds him more stubborn than anyone he's met. How could he care more about getting treasure without showing any true love for it? He holds his camera gently in the palm of his hands, trying to not form a face, but he smiles a bit saddened. This camera means the whole world to him, and that's something he will never trade for anything, though maybe for one person. He turns to see Natsumi running up to him and smiles, waving hello. Tsukasa smirks and walks towards her, patting her head to her blushing confusion as he walks ahead back to the studio. Natsumi pulps her cheeks embarrassed and chases after him with her thumb sticking up. Dragonic notices this and smirks a bit, following them back home. Tsukasa lets out a deep breath, drinking a cup of coffee while having his legs rested over the chair. Natsumi sweat drops, able to tell Tsukasa had a long day. Another world saved. Nice job, Tsukasa. Dragonic declares, smiling with Yusuke grinning too. Tsukasa sighs, pulling out the Faiz Kamen ride card and just says, putting it away, "The kid will be fine." Natsumi nods, smiling, knowing so too. Takumi no longer needs to be afraid of himself. Isn't that what's more important? That no matter what you are, as long as you have a sense of humanity, it means you are human? Then on to the next world. Dragonic proclaims, pulling down on the rope as the background drop changes. Pulling out a new drop, but also a note on it. Huh? Dragonic mutters as Natsumi walks up to the letter and pulls it out. A note? She questions, opening it up. Tsukasa watches standing up and is a bit concerned about who it might be. To Tsukasa, "Try your best to not get in my way in the next world." Natsumi begins to read the note. "Especially so you can't eat sea cucumber." Tsukasa widens his eyes as Natsumi shows him the letter that had the Dean logo. "Kato," Tsukasa declares with an angry smirk, not going to let him get away with the beating he gave him or this further insult. That punk. Now with the super form ride cards and the Faiz cards, he'll get even with him. Tsukasa squeezes his right hand, beginning to vow loudly. Next time. Natsumi sweat drops, at least happy to see Tsukasa this passionate. Yusuke also sweat drops, not wanting this type of rivalry for him. Dragonic, however, grins as next time he'll burn that thief. Absol, however, whines, looking outside as the building is being teleported to the next world, all while the Mon is looking uneased towards Kato, who watches from the distance. He smirks as he has a new world and a new treasure to steal too. End of part 8. Like and subscribe.